So we're going to start today with just a couple slides um, talking about Zyxel in general. What we found is we often get a lot of new partners joining these webinars, and people oftentimes aren't that familiar with us, even though they're selling our products. So we are Zyxel Networks. We've been making computer networking products for over 30 years. We got our start back in 1989. That includes our US office. Our US office has been around since roughly that same amount of time. And we've been stuck in the same general area of Anaheim, California. We've moved around from building to building as we've grown, but we've stayed in that same area. Now, our office is here in Anaheim, California. That is our sales office. That is our warehouse. That is our marketing. And that is our tech support. So when you call in for tech support during normal hours, you are talking to a Zyxel employee that at least spends a few days a week out of the Anaheim office, if not working from home the other days. We've deployed over 100 million devices out in the field. We serve 150 different global markets. In fact, the US market is not one of our largest. Our largest are in Europe and Asia. So we are part of something called the Zyxel Group, formerly known as Unizix. So it's a bunch of different sister companies that all sort of work together. These are just a few of them here. There are some others that aren't listed on the screen, but the main one is Zyxel Networks, which is me. That's our products that are aimed at the business networking space. So switches, access points, security firewalls, that sort of thing. Zyxel Communications is our sister company. So they are the ones who make our telco products. So for those of you looking for CPE, VDSL, ADSL, fiber CPE, etc., those come from our sister company, Zyxel Communications. We've also got another sister company down in here called Zequam that makes our LTE DAS products. So currently we've got one of those, and we've got more coming on the way. And then some of our other companies here, MitraStar is our manufacturing arm, Black Cat is a cyber defense company, etc. So today we are here to talk about Nebula. So Nebula is our cloud managed networking solution. And in fact, Nebula was the first full stack cloud networking solution aimed at SMB. We've been selling Nebula products now since 2016. So we've been doing this for quite a long time. And we were the first to get in full feet into this space back when we got started back in 2016. Most of the solutions on the market were like Cisco's standard Meraki were aimed at the enterprise space, or they were just aimed at one product, usually access point management through the cloud. So we were the first vendor to take that full stack that Meraki offered and offer a similar solution specifically tailored for the SMB rather than the enterprise. So the ideas behind Nebula was to take everything that goes into creating and setting up a brand new network for one of your customers and to simplify the process. So by using Nebula instead of managing it the traditional direct way where you go on site, you connect directly to it via, web GUI, SSH, whatever, and managing the devices, to use the cloud instead. And by doing that, we dramatically reduce the amount of stuff that you need to do during the setup and deployment of that network. And for many other things, while we don't eliminate them, we drastically reduce the amount of time it takes you to do those items. So now we'll sort of go through the basic feature sets here when it comes to Zyxel's Nebula platform. So one of the cool things we can do here is we can do setup without unboxing. So you can start configuring your hardware without having to take it out of the box to do so. At any point, you can log into the Nebula interface, create a new customer, and start creating a new network for them. And many features can be configured right then and there. For more hardware-specific products or configurations, you do need to have the hardware. But we have a QR code on the outside of the box on most Nebula products. You simply scan that QR code with the Nebula app, add it to your customer's site, and you can start configuring it from there. You do not need to manually configure the hardware at any point. And Nebula's got a number of different wizards and default settings that allow you to get a new network, at least with basic functionality, up and running in just a few minutes. So to use Nebula, there's no additional hardware or software required. You simply buy Nebula compatible hardware, and that's all you need to do. There's no software that needs to be run. There's no virtual machines that need to be set up. There's no cloud keys or CNA devices that need to be plugged in on the network. Nebula compatible hardware will directly interface with the cloud itself. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on a future slide, but I want to make this clear here. You do not have to use Nebula to manage our products, and our products will automatically switch between standalone or cloud managed mode based on how you want to configure them. You do not need to configure the individual piece of hardware and tell it needs to go out and connect to the cloud. So Nebula was designed from the ground up with the idea that you're going to manage everything through a web browser. That web browser interfaces with the cloud. So anywhere you have access to an internet connection in a web browser, you have access to your customers' networks and configuration. So Nebula features built-in user management. We have a cloud-hosted database that can be used for a number of different features. You can use it to provide WPA2 and WPA3 enterprise security, where each user has a username and password that they require to get on the network. You can use it for MAC filtering to block off certain devices from connecting to your wireless network. You can set it up and use it for controlling guest access to a guest network. And then, of course, obviously, we have management in there for your admin accounts. You can have multiple admin accounts with different levels of access. So built into our access points is easy to set up and use secure guest access. So even if you aren't using one of our gateways, our access points have captive portal hotspot functionality built directly into the access points themselves. So this lets you set up a captive portal for a guest network that guests can get onto. And we provide a lot of different ways for you to be able to configure this. The pages themselves are customizable. We've got basic customization through the Nebula interface. We make it so you can download the HTML and CSS files and customize them however you want. Or we can give you the code that you can insert into your own pages and simply plug the or point the captive portal at your own hosted pages. And then when it comes to logging in for those guests, we can have them log in with a username and password. We can have them log in and just simply agree to a terms of service page. We can require the register first before they get access to the internet. Or you can set it up to use Facebook to do authentication. So a lot of flexibility there based on whether you're providing guest access at a corporate office for salespeople or customers who are visiting you, or whether you're trying to provide a more public hotspot type situation, such as a small hotel or coffee shop or things like that. And we also have the ability to do automatic guest isolation. So if you're using our switches and our access points, we can automatically configure the VLANs to put the guest network on its own separate VLAN. If you're not using Nebula switches or you're not using switches that support layer 2 or VLAN functionality, that's okay. Our access points can do something called layer 2 isolation, where we prevent any connected client devices from being able to send packets to local area resources and simply restrict them to internet-only access without having to worry about VLANs and layer 2 plus switches. So with Nebula, all updates are done over the air. So that includes configuration changes are done over the air. And we do have some smart logic that makes sure when we're applying certain configuration changes that we apply them in the correct order so that devices don't accidentally lose connectivity. I'm sure we've all been messing with VLANs and accidentally made a device unreachable. Nebula helps stop that from happening. It makes sure when you're applying things and changes that were made in Nebula, they are applied in the right order. It's also where we do our firmware updates. So you can go ahead with Nebula and schedule when you want firmware updates to take place. Our access points feature a smart wireless mesh functionality. So you can set this up to create meshes for you, simply turn it on, and the access points will automatically create the mesh themselves, including those that do not have a wired backhaul, so you can extend out your network. We also have the ability to enable it so if a access point loses its wired connectivity, it automatically switches to a mesh backhaul until that wired connection is restored. All of our business class access points, so that's everything that is 3 or 4 numerals in the model name, have access to WPA2 and 3 enterprise-based security. We also support all the standard roaming protocols, 802.11r, K, and V, for fast roaming and doing voice over Wi-Fi roaming. On the switch side of things, we give you a nice visual view of your switches. You can virtually stack them so all the ports are viewable at one time. And you can quickly see by looking at the ports what's going on. Do they have a cable connected? What speed is that connection? Is that port currently providing PoE to a connected device? You can look at things like data utilization over time, and give you a number of tools in there to help test and verify your internet connections. And then we also give you access to some standard security features on your switches, things like using 802.1x authentication, um, using LoopGuard and DHCP Server Guard to make sure somebody doesn't plug in their own router the wrong way onto the local network, and giving you access to some other fast features there. So up to this point, just about everything I've talked about is free. So Nebula itself is a free cloud managed platform. At the moment, there are no limitations to the number of devices you can manage in the free version of Nebula or the number of customers you can manage with the free version of Nebula. So this sets us apart from a lot of our competition, where they either do not offer a free tier at all or the free tier is severely limited. So when you're looking at our hardware, when we first got started with Nebula, we did it the Cisco Meraki way, where with Cisco, you have Cisco products, which you manage traditionally. If you want cloud, you have to buy the Cisco Meraki products, which can then only be managed in the cloud. So we copied that initially, but quickly learned that not everybody wants to deploy cloud all the time. Maybe today you don't, tomorrow you do, or you have certain customers that you want the cloud for and certain ones you don't, and you don't want to have to learn two sets of hardware. So our solution to this is something called Nebula Flex, which basically applies to all Nebula products that are currently being produced. And basically what that means is we have one set of hardware, which can either be managed the traditional standalone mode or can be managed using the Nebula Cloud. And it's super simple to switch between the modes. If you want to, out of the box, the device will boot up in standalone mode. Once you've added that device to your Nebula cloud and assigned it to a customer, within a few minutes, the device will detect that you now want to manage it in the cloud, and it will automatically reset itself and reboot into cloud managed mode. If at any point you decide you no longer want to cloud manage that device, you simply remove it from the Nebula interface and it will automatically reboot itself back into standalone mode. Now, a key thing to keep in mind here is the configurations are not ported between modes. So when you do switch modes, if you switch it to cloud mode, it will automatically download the configuration that's set up for it in the cloud. And when you switch it back over to standalone mode, it will simply factory reset itself with a default configuration. And then you'll have to log in and configure it or upload a past configuration file to it. So while Nebula itself is free, there are a number of optional licenses that we offer. So I want to talk about a few of those today. So the first one to talk about here is our main Nebula interface. This is what we call Nebula Control Center. And there are three tiers of service. There's the base pack, the plus pack, and the pro pack. So the base pack is our free version of Nebula. Again, at the moment, there's no limitations to the number of devices or customers or sites that you can manage with the free version of Nebula. And then if you want to pay, we unlock some additional features that are primarily aimed at MSP type features. So the plus pack is sort of an in-between here, which unlocks some things like push notifications when devices go offline, reports, things like that. And then we've got Pro Pack, which unlocks a lot of diagnostic and logging features. And we will talk a little bit more about it on another slide here. These are going to be a per organization. So in Nebula, when you're setting things up, each of your customers, you're going to want to set them up as their own organization. So each customer is going to be their own org, and then you can have multiple sites under that org. So when it comes to these Plus and Pro Pack, to upgrade to these, every device in that organization needs to have a license before it will allow you to switch over to these modes. The other type of license we have here is our MSP pack. So this is a license that's not based on an organization or devices. This is based on admin account. So you buy this license, you apply it to an admin account, and then that admin account gets access to a bunch of new features that apply to all of the organizations it manages, but only through that admin account. So if you want MSP type features for 2 different admins, you would need to buy 2 different MSP pack licenses. The Pro Pack and the MSP pack are both available for a 30-day free license through Nebula. You simply log into that organization through Nebula. You go into the license page, and we have a page which has demos of all the different optional licenses. So you can enable those 30-day trials and play around with those features before you decide whether or not you want to pay for them going forward. The vast majority of our customers are simply using the base pack here, the free version of Nebula. So just to highlight here again, in Nebula, each of your customers will be their own organization. By default, they will be on the free version of Nebula. So if you want to upgrade them, you will need to buy Plus or Pro licenses for every device on that org, and then that org will update to Plus or Pro Pack features. If at any point the licenses fall off, you will get plenty of notifications via email letting you know that licenses are about to expire and that licenses have expired. We give you a 15-day grace period to fix that license situations. If you don't, it will then fall back to the free version of Nebula again. At no point are you locked out of your hardware like some of our other competitors. So Nebula applies to quite a lot of our products here. So I've got this slide up here to sort of go over the different versions here. So basically the top half of this slide are Nebula Flex products. The bottom half of this slide are Nebula Flex Pro products. So what Nebula Flex Pro means is that this device comes bundled with a 1-year Pro Pack license. You don't have to use that license. Obviously, you can't use that license unless you have licenses for all your hardware, but that's the main difference here. In the case of access points, it also unlocks the ability to use a local area controller for management. So regular Nebula Flex on our APs is basically any AP that starts with NWA. On our switches, it's going to be the 1915, 1920, and 1930 series switches. And then our SCR50AXE by default is a standard Nebula Flex product. And then if you buy our USG Flex series products that are standalone, those are going to be Nebula Flex. For Nebula Flex Pro, it's basically every access point that starts with the letter W. On our switches, it's the 1350 series, the 2220 series, and the 3800 series. And then when it comes to our security appliances, basically any one of our security appliances, whether it's the ATP series or the USG Flex, if it comes bundled with UTM features, it also is going to come bundled with that 1-year Pro Pack license. And then our outdoor LTE router, that also is Nebula Flex Pro, so it comes with a 1-year license. Now, you may have noticed here that I don't have the USG Flex H series on this slide. And the reason for that is they are not at the moment fully Nebula ready. So I've just left them off here, but the general rule is going to apply. If it's a USG Flex H standalone, Nebula Flex. If it's a USG Flex H series, which comes bundled with UTM, it will also come bundled with that Nebula Pro license. Now, at the moment, the USG Flex H series cannot be directly managed with Nebula. We do have a pass-through mode, which allows you to log into Nebula and then basically be passed through to the USG Flex H series GUI. So you can configure the GUI through the cloud, through a tunnel through the cloud. But for true USG Flex cloud management on the H series, that will be towards the end of this year. So we've got a comparison chart showing you the feature differences between the free version of Nebula, the Plus Pack, and the Pro Pack. I'm going to hit some of these really quick because I've got slides on some of these other features, but this can be found on our website. A quick Google search for like Nebula Base and Plus Pack or Pro Pack should easily find you a link to our website, which has this breakdown in a lot more detail than what I've got here. But I do want to hit some of the key things here. So to begin with, all of them have our plug and play installation. All of them give you access to our GUI interface through the cloud. They give you the ability to load in a floor plan or use Google Maps to map where hardware has been installed. All of them support our zero-touch Nebula Flex configuration. All of them do over-the-air firmware management and provide basic firmware scheduling. All of them give you access to our mobile app that's available on iOS and Android. All of them store logs in the cloud, although how much logs they store differs. So the free version of Nebula only stores 24 hours of data in the clouds. PlusPack gives you a week's worth of data in the cloud, and then ProPack stores a year's worth of logs in the cloud. Now, all versions of Nebula also give you access to the ability to export your logs to a syslog server. So if you want more than 24 hours, but you don't want to pay for Plus and ProPack, you can set up your own syslog server and simply have those logs exported to your server, which you maintain. The other area where we see some differences here is how many admin accounts you can have per customer. So the free version of Nebula gives you 5 admin accounts per customer that you're managing. PlusPack gives you 8, and ProPack gives you an unlimited amount. We have that cloud authentication database. So for the free version of Nebula, we give you 50 entries in that database. PlusPack gives you 100 entries. In ProPack, it's an unlimited number of entries. And most functionality, which uses this Nebula Cloud Authentication Server, also supports standard 802.1x. So again, if you don't want to use our cloud solution, you can always set up your own Radius server for providing that same functionality. This is just our cloud-hosted version of that. All of the core functionality of your products is available in all 3 versions of Nebula. That includes MAC filtering, 802.1x authentication. Captive portal functionality is available in all of them. So some of the extra features you get with Plus and ProPack, the more advanced firmware scheduling, allowing you to do individual schedules based on the type of hardware or on individual pieces of hardware, advanced reporting, the ability to automatically generate branded reports that you can send to yourself or your customer, our automatic network topology view, email and push notification alerts when devices go offline, and the ability to use what's called Wi-Fi vouchers for sort of a pay-per-play guest access option. And then the ProPack gives you like year-long audit logs, which tracks who made what configuration changes and when, the ability to synchronize, clone, and template your existing customers to make it quicker to set up new customers, the ability to back up and restore switch configurations, the ability to open up a ticket with our HQ when you need support help, etc. So now we'll sort of touch a little bit more on some of these features that are available here in the ProPack. And I'm just going to focus on ProPack because that's what most of you are buying. Very few of you are buying that PlusPack. ProPack costs you roughly $30 per device per year. So some of the things you get here, organization synchronizing, VPN orchestrator, like I mentioned here, the ability to back up and restore switch configurations from the cloud, the ability to clone switches and clone sites, etc. This is our automatic topology view. It's just recently been upgraded with some new features. So it automatically maps out which things on your network are plugged into which other devices. So it's a real handy tool when you're troubleshooting and trying to figure out, okay, this AP has got this issue. And then you can trace it back to see what the connectivity is going backwards to find out where the issue may be. The ability to support dynamic pre-shared key. So this is a cool feature for businesses. You know, the way we're supposed to be doing business Wi-Fi security is using WPA Enterprise, where each user has their own unique username and password. And what we've found is in the real world, most businesses, especially small businesses, don't want to deal with that. So dynamic pre-shared key is a way to get you almost that same level of security with a lot simpler management for the IT team or whoever it is that's on site that has to manage this. And basically, it just uses standard pre-shared key where you've got an SSID. You give the user a pre-shared key that they then connect to that SSID with. You don't have to set up an 802.1x client. You don't have to configure certificates. But when the user authenticates, it matches the pre-shared key they use to log in with that user and automatically assigns VLANs based on that user's password. So that way, each user gets their own unique password. If somebody leaves the company, you simply deactivate their password. You don't have to change it for everybody or worry about a disgruntled, employee logging in the middle of the night and getting access to the corporate network because they're all using the same password. You simply turn off the password for that user. The ProPack in Nebula also gives you access on the wireless LAN side of things to artificial intelligence and or machine learning. Basically, we can monitor what's going on your wireless network. And based on issues we see with client connectivity, we can automatically make changes to what's going on your wireless LAN configuration to try to solve those issues automatically for you. On the switch side of things, as I mentioned before, we've got that automatic topology view to help you troubleshoot things. We have our intelligent PoE, which is a part of the free version of Nebula. We have the ability with ProPack here to automatically set up VLANs by looking at the MAC address of connected devices. So you can set in a vendor's first, I forget how many digits it is. I want to say 6 digits of the MAC address that's shared by all devices from that vendor and automatically move them to a specific VLAN. So this is really common to use for voice over IP. Since you're probably deploying all of the same brand of phone, you simply put in the first few digits of the MAC address, and then we'll automatically move those devices to the voice VLAN when they get plugged in, regardless of which port they're getting plugged in at. We have the ability to detect if a connected PoE device becomes non-responsive and automatically reboot that non-responsive device for you. And if you're doing IPTV, we also have machine learning to monitor your IPTV video streams and give you reports of any issues we've seen and suggestions on features or configuration changes to solve those features. And again, as we talked about earlier, we have the ability to back up and restore switch configurations with ProPack, clone switches that have already been deployed to a new switch so we don't have to start everything from scratch, the ability to use templates to synchronize setting changes across multiple different sites. And Nebula also touches our security products. So our security products are going to have a whole set of licenses specifically aimed at those security services that are essentially separate from Nebula, right? So whether you're using a security appliance in the cloud or whether you're using it in standalone mode, you will have UTM security subscriptions that you may or may not want to apply. So that's going to be true in Nebula. So I'm not going to go through all of the different ones there. I will talk about a few of the features here that are available through our security appliances. First one here, and this is actually for our access points, is something called Connect and Protect or Connect and Protect Plus. So this is a IP reputation-based UTM filter, which you can apply on a per AP basis. So if you, for some reason, you do not have a security appliance at your location, maybe you have a router that was provided by your ISP and you can't easily replace it or configure it, you can still offer your users that type of UTM type security for your wireless users through that Connect and Protect license. And you can mix and match. So it can, if you want to, you can apply it to all of your APs, or you can only apply it to select APs that need that functionality. We also have collaborative detection and response. So when you've got a full Zyxel network with a security appliance and our switches and access points, we can do collaborative detection and response to be able to identify a lot more types of threats and attacks and respond to them much more efficiently. So as we talked about before, we've got access to basically all of those same UTM security features in Nebula as we do in standalone mode. We also have the ability to tie Nebula directly into SecuReporter. So SecuReporter is our own separate platform that provides a lot of in-depth analysis and monitoring and graphing of what's going on at your customer sites via security. So that is merged into Nebula, so you can quickly jump between Nebula and SecuReporter. And then we make it easy to do centralized provisioning and synchronization of VPN settings between different sites or for remote users. We've got a lot of different flexible options for remote users to get them back to the network, whether they're using a built-in client that's part of their mobile device or their laptop, whether they're using our VPN client or our SSL VPN client, or whether they're using our secure wireless functionality. So secure wireless allows us to turn an access point into a cloud-managed VPN appliance. So you give it to your users, they plug it into their existing home router, and then it broadcasts a specific SSID. You connect to that SSID. You have to authenticate with 802.1x. You can also require two-factor authentication, and once they've authenticated, That SSID basically creates a VPN tunnel back to the corporate office. So one of the questions we get a lot about is, how does Nebula itself work? Do I have to worry about downtime? What about things like PCI or HIPAA compliance? So I want to talk a little bit about that here really quick. So the Nebula cloud is hosted by Amazon AWS. So as a general rule, as long as Amazon AWS is working, we are working. We are distributed. So even if AWS does have some problems, in theory, with AWS distribution, not all parts of AWS are affected, and those other areas can take over while those ones are down. Doesn't always work, but basically it gives us a 4 nines uptime SLA. Because it's AWS, there's no scaling issues for you. There's no additional licenses you need to buy. As you add more customers and devices, we automatically scale up for you there. Now, when it comes to privacy, HIPAA, PCI, you can use Nebula with those. The Nebula does not preclude those. And part of the reason for that is basically nothing is going between our hardware and the cloud except for management, configuration changes, uploading logs. That's all there. None of your user information is being set up to our cloud. So it keeps us pretty much exempt from a lot of the issues you may run into otherwise. So basically, LAN traffic stays on the LAN. Internet traffic goes directly out to the internet. There was a different cloud solution not too long ago that was funneling most traffic through their cloud before it went out onto the internet. So we don't do any of that. So it can be used with PCI. It can be used as HIPAA. And another question we get has to do with what is the communication between our devices and the cloud? How is that secured? So a lot of the other, especially SMB cloud architecture out there is oftentimes built on a purely in-house solution. So for us, what we've done is we've followed an industry standard called NetConf. So that's what handles the communication between the cloud and our individual products. So that way, instead of worrying that you have to trust us to have created a decent security platform and protocol, no, we're using what's basically something that's out there in the public domain that's fully vetted to handle that and make sure that all your data is secured. So just a quick summary for you. Nebula, designed to make it easy to deploy new networks, reduce the amount of time and effort that goes into them, and we can automatically scale those networks when it comes to management as needed. Configuration is done easily. We give you a lot of tools in there, especially with ProPack, to be able to troubleshoot and solve issues that may be coming up and allow you to proactively go after those. So if you haven't played around with Nebula yet, at any point you can go to our Nebula website, nebula.zyxel.com. And there is a button on there that takes you over to a live demo, so you can play around with that live demo. If you are part of our Zyxel partner program, you can talk to your sales guys, and we may be able to hook you up with a 60-day demo pack for you to play with yourselves. And of course, it's free. So at any point, you can turn it on and start playing around with an actual live version of it. So just to highlight a couple things here for you, our YouTube page is Zyxel America channel. We are a global company, and each different region has its own YouTube channels. So for North America, it's Zyxel America channel. Most of our webinars are recorded and uploaded there within 1 to 2 business days of when the webinar took place. So if you missed a webinar or had to step away, you can always find it there shortly after. You can always go back through and find previous versions of like today's webinar that we've done in the past. Just to see how things have changed. But we also have stuff on there like some best practices videos, video case studies, testimonials, things like that. And then, of course, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn at Zyxel US channel. So lastly, we're done. That's it, guys, as far as the overview goes. There have been no questions. So if you do have questions, send them in using the question and answer interface. I will stick around for a few more minutes for you in case you're working on typing something up. For the rest of you, thank you for joining us today. I hope you learned a little bit something there. My email's up there on the screen. Feel free to email me feedback, suggestions, topics you'd like to see covered in future webinars. I am currently working on a new Nebula webinar where we go into how to configure and set up your customers, how to configure and set up your admins, because we've been running into a lot of issues where people don't realize, for instance, you can create an admin account that only has access to certain sites. You don't have to give them access to all sites in an organization. You can limit them to specific sites. you can go in there and you can control whether they have what level of access they have on each site. So you can give them access to 5 sites and split up, these sites they can only view, these sites they can configure, these sites they can only be an installer, etc. So I'm working on that. Those will be showing up here in the near future. So keep an eye out for that. But Try and myself generally do these webinars on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have no questions yet, so I am going to go ahead and end today's webinar. I hope I see you at one of our future webinars.